6 months into the pandemic, when all prison transfers had supposedly been canceled, I and 63 other people were transferred from the medium security prison Buckingham to the medium low Coffeewood. And it was kind of traumatic for all of us, right? We already had the anxiety and the things going on with COVID. And then also the fact that it had taken me 12 years to work my way to the honor pod. I had a single cell. Like, even during the pandemic, I had some amazing opportunities. I'd been teaching a lot of classes and I was able to make videos that were then shown statewide because they realized that by not giving people programming or classes, they were going to have problems. So they wanted to create these videos that would provide educational opportunities and cultural opportunities and different things. So I taught Spanish. I did a series on nonviolent communication that actually ended up getting lost, but we actually did some meaningful things. And then in the middle of that, they were like, all right, you guys pack up, you're going somewhere else. And that was hard for me because I'd been at Buckingham for 13 years. Like, I hadn't been outside of those walls in 13 years, and I was comfortable. Like, it wasn't a good thing, and the prison was really getting crazy during the pandemic because guys were just like stuck in their cells for months and just like getting anxious and having no outlets and no visits and like limited contact with family. And then all of a sudden we'd let them out in the pods and guys would get drunk and guys were overdosing, guys were fighting and stabbing, and it was a really wild time. But what do you do? I guess I could have bucked the transfer. I could have done something, but then I would have lost my honor pod, my single cell, and I was trying to stay out of trouble. And during all this time, I had this hope in the back of my head that my clemency was going to come through. So I wasn't going to do anything to mess it up. So at 6 in the morning, they came around for count the morning that I was getting transferred. And by 6:30, they called and said, all right, Cross, you got to go get on the bus. So I had packed all my stuff up. I had given almost all my stuff away because over 13 years, I had accumulated a lot of things. You were only allowed to have 13 books, but I took 13 books with me and left about 60 or 65 books with different people because over the years, I had just accumulated them, or guys would go home and give them to me, or I would buy other books to turn in when I had to turn some in to get new books. And it was this like collection. It was like a life that I had built, and it was like a cell that felt like home. So they called me to go, and I was the first one to get on the bus. So they put me in this orange jumpsuit, and then they put me in shackles. So you get handcuffs, you get shackles around your ankle, you get a chain that runs between them and what they call a black box, which locks around the handcuffs. So there's no way you can actually get to the handcuff mechanism. You would have to pick the lock on the black box and then pick the handcuff mechanism. That's why it's almost impossible to escape from, though people have apparently escaped from it. I think it happened recently. So I was the first one on the bus, and they load me up, and I realized I'm the first one there. I'm like, this is going to suck, because it's 6:30 in the morning, and what was crazy was there was this dinging, like ding, 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 because they wouldn't put on the parking brake. Had they literally just put on the parking brake, this ding would have gone away. But for 2 or 2.5 hours, I sat there listening to ding, 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 and it drove me absolutely crazy. So I was the first one on there, so I got my pick of seats. And at that point, I was thinking of, like, if I get out, I want to do a tiny home. Like, I want a really simple life. Like, maybe I would convert a bus or an old school bus. And so I was, like, imagining, like, all right, I'd put the bathroom there, and I'd put this here. And I was trying to use the time as creatively and productively as I could. So then they started loading people up. I knew everybody. I'd been on the camp for 13 years, so I knew everybody there. Some of the guys I liked, some of the guys I didn't. But, like, some of it was cool. One of my old roommates got on the bus. We ended up sitting next to each other. And it was, like, a comfortable existence. It's the best way I can describe it. One of the things that was uncomfortable was everybody had to carry their own TV. And the newer TVs were like flat screens, but I bought mine in 2007, so it was like this big, it's a 13-inch TV on the screen, but it's like this big, clear bubble TV. And so it's like, there's no way to balance because your hands are like this, you're like stuck, you can't go but so far from your feet, so you have to like lift your feet up if you want to lift your hands up. It was interesting to try to balance and not drop this TV. But there was also something kind of exciting because I hadn't been outside of those fences in 13 years. Like, I hadn't seen the world. I hadn't been on transport. I hadn't been anywhere. So in a weird way, I was kind of excited. So I managed to get a side seat near the window. And, I talked to my old roommate. I talked to some other guys. We kind of killed time while we were waiting for the bus to load up, for them to finally get the inventory right and, figure everything out. And then we took off. And it's a slow trip, but it feels amazingly fast because I haven't been in a vehicle. Like, the fastest I've been is like however fast I run around the track. So to be going around a corner in a bus at 25 miles an hour or 35 miles an hour feels like, I'm on a roller coaster. And I was able to watch the world go by. And I remember that being one of the most thrilling things, like seeing people and seeing houses and seeing cars and seeing livestock. And that seems so mundane to people, but I hadn't seen that in person. And let me tell you, you may think of a window as just a TV. It is not the same. I've seen the whole world on TV. Seeing it out of the window, seeing an actual person, an actual life, like an actual moment, just felt so magical. And there was a lot of the trip that I was just silent. Like, my old roommate would talk to me or somebody else would ask me something, and most of the time I would just sit there. I just wanted to watch the world. I wanted to feel real. And I remember one of the things that got me was the scope of things. Like, we were driving by houses, and like I said, I was thinking about tiny houses at the time. So I saw little like trailers and little like RVs and stuff on the side of the road. And then I saw these mansions we were driving by, these like 8-bedroom. And I was like, who lives, like, what do you do with all that space? Like, how do you do it? And if you guys haven't followed me for that long, I lived in a tiny house shortly after I got out for about 6 months. And I really enjoyed that. Like, that felt really comfortable. But now I understand, like, if you have a life and like now I live with somebody else and like you can't just fit 2 people and a dog into a tiny house. And there were some adjustments that had to be made. But I remember just being shocked by the world and the new cars because I hadn't seen a new car up close and in person. You know, see people riding by on motorcycles, which is like, I'm fanatical about motorcycles. So every time they went by, I was like, ooh, it's a motorcycle. And just little things that meant so much to me that may not seem important or seem significant. So again, it was like 2.5 hours to load the bus up. We're on the trip. The trip takes about an hour and a half. So that's 4 hours. And then we get to the place and we park in front of the prison. And this is standard where they have to take all the paperwork in and start figuring the paperwork out. And we sat there for almost 2 hours. So we're sitting on the bus for basically 6 hours. Like, somebody's got to pee. Like, we all had to pee, but one guy like really had to pee. He had apparently gotten up that morning and drank a bunch of coffee. And so he was like, yo, I gotta pee, like, y'all gotta let me off the bus or something. And they were like, sorry, dude, there's nothing we could do. So he like waddled up to the front with his chains and his handcuffs and his shackles, and he like reached through. There was a little like section you could like pass things through the grate where the guard sat, and he got a styrofoam cup, and he sat there right in front of the guards and took a piss. And they were not happy about this. They were like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, no, we'll write you a charge. But at the same time, it was like, dude, you've had this guy on the bus for 6 hours. Like, we're just sitting here doing nothing. Like, you don't have a bathroom. Like, you're not providing anything. And so they were upset, but they didn't write him a charge. They didn't make a big deal out of it. I guess they kind of understood. But there's nowhere to put it. Like, you can't roll down the windows or like pull the windows down like on a school bus to throw it out. Like, there's nowhere to put it. So he just like set it down in the corner. He had to do this like weird squat because he was all shackled up. So there's just like a cup of pee in the corner of the bus, which was, I don't know, interesting. I'm surprised he didn't get kicked over. But then finally, I don't know, like 20 minutes after that, the other guard had got back on the bus and they pulled us around and they pulled us into the sally port. If you've never seen a sally port, it's a big area with gates on both sides so that both can't be open at once. So like you open the outside gate, the bus drives in, you open the inside gate, and the bus can either drive in further or you can just go from there. And so we finally got to the sally port, and there was like a whole team waiting for us. There were a bunch of counselors, there was a major, there were a bunch of lieutenants and captains. Like, it was a big deal because they were worried about people coming from a higher level institution, especially with kind of a rowdier record, to a lower medium, like a medium low. And they probably had reason to be worried because I remember when we first got there, it was just wide open. It was absolutely crazy. Because like I said, during the pandemic, things had been out of control. We had overdoses every day at the higher level. Like, we had just like stabbings and violence. And so guys got down there and they probably brought as many drugs with them as were already on that camp. And so all of a sudden the camp is flooded and guys are getting high and you're in an open dormitory. Like, I went from a single cell to an 82-man open dormitory. Like, you're right next to somebody, and you're either above or below somebody all the time. And it wasn't comfortable, and it's not like, yo, I can go in there and like, you know, do whatever I'm gonna do and have some privacy. So guys are just smoking next to each other, they're shooting next to each other, they're like doing everything they're doing, and it's profoundly uncomfortable if you're a guy who's trying to be clean, it's profoundly uncomfortable if you like quiet. And then you have the bathroom situation. So you walk into the bathroom, and on the right, you have 5 shower heads side by side, no boundaries, no barriers, like you're just right there. On your left, you have 4 sinks side by side, and then you have 3 toilets and 3 urinals. And like, when you sit down on the toilet, you're knocking knees with somebody next to you. It is not a comfortable situation. Like, it is not like this feels good. Like, I got some privacy time. Let me go just use the bathroom. It's like, I am in wide view of everything. So the guys who came from upper levels, we used to put a sheet up. We would like hang a sheet up or like hang it over here or just use the back toilet because we could hang a sheet from the wall to the corner. And they'd never seen this before. Like, they freaked out. They were coming in and threatening to charge us with like attempted escape and these crazy things because it was like, people want to use the bathroom in privacy, and you're acting like that's an unrealistic expectation. Like, people want to take a shower and put a curtain up or put a sheet up across so they can have a sense of privacy. So guys had no alone time to kind of take care of personal needs. Guys couldn't use the bathroom in private. Guys couldn't take a shower in private. It was this incredibly uncomfortable and dehumanizing situation, especially for those of us who've been locked up for a long time at places where it was taken for granted that you could tell your cellie, like, yo, I need some time, man, get out, and you could have an hour to yourself to do whatever you needed to do. So this transition to the dormitory, this transition to this new environment, as magical as it had been on the ride and being able to see the world and as kind of like filled with joy as I was, and as filled with hope as I was, it was by far the worst place I have ever been. It was the most dehumanizing. It was the most uncomfortable. I struggled to sleep. People making noise, all the PTSD stuff from the past. Every time a sneaker squeaked, like, I would freak out. I would jump out of bed. People like running into the bed, people being drunk and fighting and bumping into stuff and having no consideration. it was incredible because these same guys had been so respectful and so about kind of boundaries up at the higher level prison. They got here and it was like they just lost their minds. It was just a totally different situation. Now, when I got into the regular population, it was even worse. So initially they had us separated in quarantine for COVID, and then they spread us out to the compound. Now, a bunch of us, there was a whole situation where like, we all got COVID, and they were like, no, there's no way, you can't have COVID. And I was like, dude, people have been going to like sick call every day for the last week saying they feel sick. Like, why haven't you tested us? And I had to put in complaints and I had to raise hell. And then so finally they were like, well, we're gonna come test you today. Well, about time. And sure enough, 30 out of the 82 people test positive. So they figure out what they're doing. It was just a horrible situation. They took a bunch of us to the hole, and basically that was our quarantine. And I was happy because I was back in a single cell. Like, I was chilling, I was good. And then after a week, I actually, despite having been one of the sickest people, tested negative. And I don't know how that happened. I don't know what that was about, but I remember wanting to be back there for Christmas. Just be like, you know what? Leave me back here. I'm chilling. Like, let me have some time to myself. But that didn't what happened. They put me back in population, and they put me in a population that wasn't just Buckingham guys. It was guys that had been in this institution, and they were even louder and even more disrespectful and even crazier. And it was the worst place I'd ever been. And I even liked some of the guys. Like, there was a guy right next to me who, look, he drank and partied and did whatever, and that's cool. I just don't want to be around it at 11 o'clock at night while I'm trying to sleep and you're trying to make noise and yell and do what you're doing. So there were a lot of little conflicts, there were a lot of little adjustments, and finally, after a number of months, I was able to get moved from one pod to the other, one dorm to the other, and that made a big difference because I went to a workers' dorm where everybody went to bed, was still working a job, was still like doing things. Now, a lot of the jobs had been canceled, but they kind of like accommodated. Like, I ended up getting a medical job, so I would go to medical every day. Other people like were supposed to be rec guys, but they wouldn't let them out to do rec, but they would let them out to cut grass, or they would let them out to do something else. So it was nice that there was still a sense of like having a meaning or a purpose. Because that was the thing when I was at Buckingham. Not only did I have a single cell, but I taught classes, I led programs, I worked. Like, I had things to do that felt meaningful. It was so nice at the end of my day, having worked a full day, having exercised, to go teach Spanish, or to go teach nonviolent communication, or to go be like, look, we're gonna work on this DBT module today. Like, we're gonna do something that will give you tools to better handle your life. So losing all that when I went to the dormitory was not a pleasant thing. And especially when I remember, I went to the first counselor and I was like, hey, I want to teach Spanish and something else. She said, great, we love that. Like, how can I help? When they moved me to the other dorm with the regular population, I went to the counselor, I was like, hey, I was teaching Spanish in the other dorm. Like, I've got nonviolent communication. These are great programs. And she was like, yeah, we don't do programs here. I was like, don't you think people should have something to do other than like fight and get drunk and do whatever? She was like, no, that's not our problem. So I will forever remember that that is the face of DOC, that you have one counselor who actually cares and goes out of their way and tries to make things possible, and you have the vast majority that just don't care. They don't care about programming. They don't care about making things work. They're just there for a paycheck. And I think that's one of the shames, because there is potential to actually help people. There's potential to actually have programs. But some people, if they have to do it themselves or take any initiative, or if it's not written and mandated, they're not going to do it. And that's the problem. But anyway, so that transfer was both the best time until I got out of prison and the worst, and it led me to the place that I got out, because on August 16th, I woke up and that was unknowingly the day that I was going to get out of prison with an hour and a half's notice.